On June 7, 1967, the Six-Day War reached the stone lanes and ridges of Jerusalem. The moment is often remembered through a few charged images: paratroopers at the Western Wall, radio calls from the Old City, soldiers moving through gates that had carried centuries of memory. But the history is larger and more difficult than a single image. It is a story of a divided city, a regional war, an urban battle, religious longing, military calculation, and a diplomatic dispute that did not end when the shooting stopped. Jerusalem had been divided since the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. West Jerusalem was controlled by Israel. East Jerusalem, including the Old City and many of the sites most sacred to Jews, Muslims, and Christians, was controlled by Jordan. The armistice lines were not quiet borders in the normal sense. They were military lines with minefields, walls, no man's land, and neighborhoods facing each other at close range. Families, cemeteries, universities, hospitals, and holy places were divided by politics and war. By late May 1967, the wider region was in crisis. Egypt moved forces into Sinai, expelled the United Nations Emergency Force from positions there, and closed the Straits of Turin to Israeli shipping. Arab states issued public threats, alliances tightened, and Israel mobilized reserves. On June 5, Israel launched airstrikes against Egypt, and the conflict spread quickly. Jordan, which had a defense pact with Egypt, entered the fighting on the Jerusalem front. Artillery and small arms fire hit parts of the divided city, and Israeli leaders had to decide whether to keep the fighting limited or open a campaign for East Jerusalem. The geography mattered. Jerusalem is not an open plain. It is a city of ridges, valleys, stone neighborhoods, religious compounds, and narrow approaches. North of the Old City, Jordanian positions at Ammunition Hill protected a route toward Mount Scopus and the eastern side of the city. Mount Scopus itself was an Israeli enclave that had been isolated after 1948. If Israeli forces could link to it and break through the northern defenses, they could change the battlefield around the Old City. The battle for Ammunition Hill became one of the fiercest small-unit fights of the Jerusalem campaign. Israeli paratroopers attacked at night against Jordanian troops dug into trenches, bunkers, and fortified positions. The fighting was close, confused, and costly. Accounts from both sides describe a battle measured in meters, not sweeping maneuvers. The importance of the hill was tactical. Taking it helped open the road toward Mount Scopus and pressured the northern approach to the Old City. Its memory became symbolic because the casualties were heavy, and the fight seemed to compress the whole struggle for Jerusalem into one ridge. As Israeli units pushed through East Jerusalem, commanders also had to consider the Old City itself. It contained the Western Wall, the Temple Mount or Haram al-Sharif, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and neighborhoods whose meaning could not be reduced to military terrain. A battle inside dense holy places risked enormous destruction and international outrage. Israeli forces moved around the city walls and approached from the east. On June 7th, paratroopers entered through the Lion Gate and moved into the Old City. The military event was rapid, but the human meaning was layered. For many Jews, access to the Western Wall after 19 years of division carried deep religious and historical significance. For Palestinians living in East Jerusalem, and for the broader Arab world, the same moment marked military defeat, occupation, displacement fears, and the beginning of a new political reality. Muslim and Christian holy sites also stood inside the changed city. A responsible account has to hold those meanings together: liberation in one memory, loss and occupation in another, and a city whose sacred geography made every decision internationally visible. The wider war continued beyond the Old City. Israel fought Egypt in Sinai, Syria on the Golan Heights, and Jordan in the West Bank. The war lasted only 6 days, but its territorial consequences were enormous. Israel took control of East Jerusalem, the West Bank, Gaza Strip, Sinai Peninsula, and Golan Heights. Some of those territories later changed status through diplomacy and war. Others remain at the center of unresolved conflict. Jerusalem became the most sensitive case because questions of sovereignty, municipal control, residency, holy site administration, and national identity overlapped in one city. After the fighting, Israel expanded the municipal boundaries of Jerusalem and applied Israeli law and administration to East Jerusalem. Many countries did not recognize that annexation. The United Nations and much of the international community continued to treat East Jerusalem as occupied territory whose final status should be resolved through negotiations. Israel, meanwhile, treated United Jerusalem as its capital. Palestinians claimed East Jerusalem as the capital of a future state. These positions are not footnotes to the battle. They are part of why June 7th remains politically alive. The holy site arrangements also mattered. Israel left day-to-day religious administration of the Temple Mount or Haram al-Sharif with the Islamic Waqf, while retaining overall security control. That compromise was intended to prevent immediate religious escalation, but it has remained contested and fragile. The Western Wall Plaza was transformed, including the demolition of the Moroccan Quarter shortly after the war, a painful event in Palestinian memory, and an example of how military victory quickly became urban and political reordering. What makes June 7, 1967, such a powerful historical hinge is that it joined battlefield speed to centuries of memory. In a matter of hours, soldiers moved through positions and gates. In the aftermath, governments, communities, and religious authorities confronted questions that still have no simple settlement. The battle for Jerusalem was not merely a chapter inside the Six-Day War. It reshaped the map, the language of diplomacy, and the emotional geography of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. To understand the day clearly, we have to resist making it either a clean triumphal postcard or a single tale of defeat. It was a military operation fought in a divided city during a regional war. It was a religious and national turning point for Israelis and Jews. It was also the start of a new occupation and legal dispute for Palestinians and for much of the international community. The next checkpoint after June 7th is therefore not just the ceasefire of June 10th. It is the decades-long argument over Jerusalem's status, holy places, residents, borders, and future. The battle ended quickly. The questions it opened are still with us.